What's up, everybody? I'm Clayton. Welcome back to my movie review channel. And today we are going to be reviewing True Grit from 2010, the remake of the 1969 classic. This one, written and directed by the Coen brothers, starring Jeff Bridges, Haley Steinfeld, and Matt Damon. Yeah, so we're continuing our Western month with the True Grit remake. Already reviewed the original 1969 film. If you haven't checked that one out, go do so, because I'll be doing some comparison and contrasting with this remake and the original, things that I like better with this one, things that I like better with the original. So yeah, let's get into it. Again, this is just my opinion on this film. If you feel differently, that's perfectly fine. Let me know your thoughts on the True Grit remake. And which one do you like better? Have you seen both of them? If so, let me know your comparisons and which one you prefer. So let's get into my review of True Grit from 2010. Starting with the positives, as always. Rewatching this movie for this review, my opinion changed quite a bit. I think part of that is seeing it directly after the original, because I had seen both the original and the remake multiple times, but I had never watched them back to back. I'd never seen them like one day apart from each other. So I never really had the comparison well structured in my head when watching this one. But this time around, having seen the original for my review on that one, this remake, watching this one back, my opinion on it has changed a little bit. So actually quite a bit. So I'll just say there are some things in the remake that I do like better than the original, but there are things in the original that I do like better and prefer over the remake. So as far as the positives to this one of them is the acting. I did find the acting in this one to be overall substantially better than the original. In the original one, you had John Wayne, who was exceptional. He was fantastic as Cogburn. Outside of John Wayne, though, there wasn't really anyone that really stood out. I thought Robert Duvall did fine as Ned, but he wasn't really a standout the way that John Wayne was. So in this one, I think the cast as a whole does a really good job acting. I think Jeff Bridges really brings it as a Marshall Cogburn. I think he's not trying to be John Wayne. He's bringing something new to that character. I think he really kind of immerses himself in that character and does a really good job with the fresh interpretation of it. I think Haley Steinfeld is a much better Maddie as far as her acting and what she brings to the character. And I think Matt Damon definitely brings a lot more to the LaBeef character than Campbell did in the original. So, and then all the other side pieces, I think Josh Brolin playing, the bad guy that kills Maddie's father, I think he does a better job than the original one. Even Barry Pepper as Ned, I would say, I think he stands out more. He's more memorable than Duvall was as Ned. So the acting overall in this one, I think, is pretty significantly better than the acting in the original overall. So I did like that element to this film. It made it more entertaining for me as far as my experience with the characters in this one when the performances by the actors are better, it makes me more engaged with the performances. So it makes my experience with the characters a little better as well. So I did like the acting overall more in this one than in the original. I thought this one was well directed. I think the Coen brothers, they know how to direct a Western film pretty well as far as like shooting it. I think it looks really well. They carried over the lighting from the original into this one. I think this one is also very well lit, well shot. Cinematography here is very good. I think the costume designs are good. I like how the scenes are directed in this one, preferably over the original. I think the Coen brothers do a much better job at directing scene for scene better than Hathaway did with the original. So definitely an improved talent in directing from the remake versus the original. So that would also be a point for the True Grit remake that I would give it, is in the directing department and how the scenes were directed and shot. I think was an improvement with the remake as well. Another thing I prefer in this remake over the original is the score. I think the score is much improved in this one. There's actually some emotion to the score. There's some old hymns, gospel hymns in this score that bring some emotion, I think, to the scenes. So and it kind of fits, I think, the theme of this story better than the score in the original fit that story. So I think the score is also an improvement over the original. Another thing that I prefer in the remake over the original, the LaBeef character, I think is better written and better handled in this film. I think the performance by Matt Damon is also better than what Glenn Campbell gave in the original, but also the character writing, I think, is better written in this one than in the original. LaBeef actually felt like he had a purpose in this film. I think he was more developed. I think he was more rounded in this film than in the original. It didn't just feel like he was tagging along and just like a third wheel all the way until they needed him to do something at the very end. It actually felt like he had development in this film and was serving more of a purpose. So I think he was better written and better acted in this one than in the original. And then the dialogue. I think the dialogue here was also an improvement. It felt more natural. It felt more smooth. It felt like it fit the characters more. So I think the dialogue was also better written. So those are all positives for me with True Grit remake. I think I prefer all of those elements over the original. That being said, there are also things I prefer in the original over the remake, and that's what's going to lead me into the negatives now with this remake. One of my negatives here is I feel like this film was more of a character-driven film than a story-driven film. The original film was more about the true grit and the intestinal fortitude and toughness, physical, mental toughness of these two characters, Cogburn and Maddie, and how they resemble each other in very many ways. And they're kind of they're two individuals that are at two places of their life, but both showing heart and determination and grit. And it was more about the story of having grit in your life, having that determination, that will to persevere, and not so much on the characters themselves, where this one felt more character driven and less about the story of the grit within the characters. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but going that route, I also don't feel like the characters were as well developed. LaBeef, I thought was better developed and better rounded than in the original, but Cogburn and Maddie, I don't feel got that. The way that they start this film, the way that we're introduced to Maddie, the way that we're introduced to Cogburn, is the same person who they are at the end of the film. There's not really a whole lot of development. There's not really a whole lot of change. There's not really anything new that they learn along the way. Like, the way that they start out is the way that they kind of finish this film. And in a character-driven film, that's an issue for me, because in a character-driven film, you want to see that development. You want to see that arc with your main characters. And we don't really get that with Cogburn or Maddie in this film. The reason that wasn't a negative for me in the original was because that one was a story-driven film, not a character-driven film. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. But yeah, I don't feel like the characters were fully developed in this character-driven film. Another negative for me was Cogburn's relationship with Maddie. I don't feel was as genuine or as warm. Like in the original, John Wayne's performance as Cogburn and the way that Cogburn and Maddie's chemistry was written, it felt there was more warmth to that relationship. You felt like Cogburn, although he had this kind of rugged side to him, he still cared about Maddie. He still wanted to help her out. He still, was acting in her best interest. There was some emotional connection there with them in a couple scenes. When they're out in the woods on their journey, there's the scene where they're having a face-to-face conversation about Cogburn's past, and he kind of opens up to Maddie, and it's this face-to-face interaction with each other. And at the end, as Maddie goes to sleep, Cogburn kind of smiles as he's looking over her. It really formed that chemistry between those two characters. Like, it was more warm, it was more genuine. You got the feeling that Cogburn actually cared about this girl. I didn't get that in this one. In this one, I felt that Cogburn was more just after the money and reputation. I mean, that's what gets him on this journey, is the money. He wants to get paid. And along the way, I don't feel like his relationship with Maddie ever improved. They always kind of had tension all throughout this film. And even when Cogburn ends up going back to save Maddie at the end, I didn't really get the feeling that he was doing it because he cared about her as much as he was doing it because he wanted her to live so that he could get paid for doing, for completing his assignment and to clear his reputation. Because and the reason I didn't feel that was because they hadn't developed their relationship to make me buy into it. Like, there was tension with those two all throughout this film. Even the scene where Cogburn is opening up a little bit to Maddie and kind of telling her about his past, it was kind of in a passive way. They were just kind of on horseback, riding through the woods. It wasn't face to face. There was no real emotion to it. Where in the original, that element was there. So, that was another negative for me. Is the lack of rapport or chemistry between the Cogburn and Maddie character. I felt was much better handled and written in the original than in this one. I also didn't like that they didn't show Maddie's father being killed. In this one, he's killed off screen. We don't really see it. So we're really just having to go by what Maddie tells us happened. When she wasn't there when he died, she didn't see him get killed. We just have to take her word for it. In the original, we actually see what happens. We actually see her father being killed. So we as an audience member know the truth. We actually know what happened. In this one, we don't see that. We're just told by Maddie, who wasn't even there when it happened, this is what happened. And so to me, I prefer how the original one wrote that and directed that than in this one as well. Also, the production design, I think in this one wasn't quite as good as the original, because I felt the production design here was a little too sophisticated and a little too glamour for the 1800s. The production design in the original felt more authentic to that time period. It felt more like it fit the story and the characters better. This one, it felt a little too sophisticated, too put together. I don't really know that I buy the production design in this one, that it would be, the design of the time period. So that's not a big issue, more of a minor thing, but just something, again, contrasting the two films, I prefer in the original one. And then there's also, in this one, there were a few, I felt, wasted scenes that didn't really need to be there. They didn't really do anything for the film. One of them was the guy that Cogburn and Maddie come across, that's hanging from the tree, the dead guy that's hanging from the tree. What was that scene about? What did that do for anybody? It had no purpose to the story. It served no purpose for anything. You could take that scene out and it changes nothing with this film. So that was truly a wasted scene that did nothing, told us nothing, showed us nothing that we needed to know. Another wasted scene I thought was the shooting competition between Cogburn and LaBeef. They get into this kind of quarrel about who's the better shooter, and they have this kind of shoot off. Again, that scene, although it may have been kind of entertaining, kind of funny in some ways, it wasn't really needed. Again, if you take that scene out, what does it change? It changes nothing. It was just there for entertainment's sake. It didn't develop the characters at all. It didn't tell us anything, show us anything that we needed to know. So yeah, there were a few scenes I felt like that just weren't really needed. They were just kind of waste of screen time, waste of run time. Take them out, changes nothing with the film. And then my other negative with this one in particular was that the very last portion of this film, after Cogburn saves Maddie, it goes into this 25-year later time frame. So now we're 25 years after the events of the story, and Maddie and Cogburn had not had any type of communication with each other. We're told that Cogburn rode off into the sunset, never looked back, and 25 years later, he all of a sudden sends Maddie this invitation out of nowhere. I find that hard to believe that Cogburn would do that, because again, I didn't get the feeling throughout this film that he really had any true feeling for Maddie. And so I don't buy that character, that version of the character, 25 years after these events are done, would care to have anything to do with Maddie. So it didn't feel genuine. It didn't feel like it fit the Cogburn character that he would do that. And also, how is Cogburn still alive? 20, he was already likely in his 60s. The character himself is written to be in his 60s in this film. 25 years after the events of the story, that would put him in his late 80s, possibly early 90s. And this guy's still alive. I mean, we saw how hard he was living, throughout the film. I don't know that I buy that character, especially in the 1800s, with all the diseases and all the illnesses that were very prominent at that time period. I find it really hard to believe that Cogburn would still be alive 25 years after the events of this story. So I didn't really buy into that. So yeah, those are some negatives that I have with the film. I like the ending of the original better, definitely better than the ending of the remake. So those are just some differences, guys. Just kind of comparing and contrasting the two films. Overall, my rating for this one, I would give 2.5 stars. I used to, if you would have asked me what I would rate this film 3 or 4 years ago, I probably would have been more on the 4-star tier, but watching it back this time with fresh eyes and shortly after watching the remake or the original, there's definitely some negatives that stick out to me, and they're more significant than the negatives I had with the original. So it's still a decent film. I still had a decent experience with it. It's certainly not a bad film, but I didn't really get the enjoyment out of this one that I did with the original. I much prefer the original over the remake. I think the chemistry between Cogburn and Maddie is much better handled in the original. The story is much better delivered as well, and so on and so forth. So 2.5 stars for the True Grit remake 2010. I know that's not a popular opinion, and you may feel differently than I do on it, and that's totally fine. Again, let me know which one you prefer in the comments section. This was just my opinion. It's not the right opinion. It's just my opinion. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time. Until then, rock on.